How's it going, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of The Devil May Crypto. Today, we're going to go do a brief overview of Bloom. What is Bloom? What problems is it trying to solve? And what is my opinion on it? We're going to go a little bit over the white paper and the website mostly. We'll talk a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started. So you have to ask yourself, what is Bloom? Well, the way that they define what Bloom is it's an end-to-end protocol for identity attestation, risk assessment, and credit scoring, entirely done on the blockchain. Bloom allows both traditional and digital currency lenders to serve billions of people who currently cannot obtain a bank account or credit score. What that basically means is Bloom is a decentralized approach to credit risk assessment. It basically makes it global, so it makes it borderless. If you, from my understanding, if you go from United States to Canada or Mexico or wherever else, your credit is basically, reset. It's defaulted. So, and then on top of that, it has lower fees. They explain that it can all be done better, more efficiently with lower fees, and it also gives it the security of the blockchain, through cryptography. As you all know, something that's happening to, I think, around 150 million people in the United States is the Equifax hack or data breach, whatever you want to call it. But everybody's information is out there, and the file, it's actually as we go along, people are finding out it's worse and worse. It's worse than they actually thought. So because it was centralized, they got literally everything right away. Bloom is trying to fix issues like that. So that's kind of, the gist of what they do. We'll go a little bit further into it in just a second. So what they say, the status quo, is that there's 5 issues with the current credit infrastructure that Bloom aims to address. First is high risk of identity theft, which is we talked about with the Equifax hack. Borrowers must expose all of their personal information when applying for a loan, the same info an attacker can use to open new lines of credit. So it's basically, they use your identity and use your credit, and they move along with it. Cross-border credit scoring. So credit histories are not portable across countries, like I said, forcing individuals to reestablish their credit track records from scratch when they relocate. A lot of military do this, or I think the biggest thing that, side note, one of the reasons I like cryptocurrencies is because they're all trying to aim for a more borderless approach. As we move on, as we go past the current barriers of transportation, we're going to need cryptocurrencies. We're going to need to become more globalized. Globalization is the future. So instead of flying 15 hours to get across the world, it might be an hour or two. Within a few years, you'll probably be traveling in space at speeds that you've never traveled before. This will happen within the next 20 years, most likely 30 years. I'm not sure. I'm a big futurist, but the technology is out there and it is happening, and it's going to happen very quickly. So something like cross-border credit scoring, when people move, when transportation is super easy, when we can get from one point A to point B like this, it's really going to change the world. It's gonna change language. It'll usher in a new era. I think this is a way to future-proof credit is through Bloom. And then number 3, creditworthiness assessment. So most credit systems rely almost entirely on historical debt repayment information, and therefore cannot easily accommodate users who are new to credit. What that means is if you are young, if you're somebody that's never needed credit before, if you've never borrowed, if you've had money, you have basically no credit. So the way that the credit scoring system works right now is you basically have to have a very decent history. It's kind of like coming out of college. A lot of you will probably know about this issue, but coming out of college, you have a degree, you have a lot of education, you have a lot of knowledge that you want to put into some places, and you want to get a job, and they all say, well, you have no resume, you haven't built up any form of like work history. Like what did you do? Well, you were in college the whole time. Especially people that are in very, very hard degrees to get into. If you did an engineering degree or something like, if it goes into pre-med, I don't know if a lot of these people have taken organic chemistry or something along those lines, it is a full-time job in itself. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that getting getting into the credit system, you have to do it for a while. You have to have a history, just like you have to have a resume for other places. It is unfair to newer generations. So I can see, like, people in the future, especially young investors or people that want to get large loans for a business or for whatever reason it may be. They'll be more inclined to use something like Bloom. So let's go off to the fourth one here. Limited ability to expand. What does that mean? Well, let me go it over one more time because it's in front of my head. So let me. Limited ability to expand is borrowers in markets with less developed financial and regulatory infrastructure struggle to access credit as lenders have limited identity and scoring data. So because of what Bloom does, it'll be easier to get into markets where people they don't have the same facilities, same establishments that we do. Let's say in very developed cities or countries or wherever else that may be. So it'll be more of a global it'll be what's a good way to put it? Everybody will be on an equal standard, at least. So it's definitely more fair in that aspect to it too. Next we have uncompetitive credit scoring. Let me try to get out from behind that. Give me 1 second. What they mean by uncompetitive credit scoring is credit data is centralized in most markets, and a single provider scores credit, resulting in an uncompetitive ecosystem for you evaluating credit risk. So because it's centralized, there's only one person really able to make the rules for what your credit is. Not one person, but one establishment. And it's one type of formula that assesses your credit rating. They want to change that too. So this is kind of their 5 main points, and I love the way they presented it. It's done very well, and I think it does need to be worked on, like I previously talked about. So I hope you like that. Let's go on to the next part. So the Bloom protocol provides solutions allowing any lender authorized by a borrower to safely and securely issue credit to that borrower. What that means is, and if it's an organization, a bank, any form of like lending company, or a person, I'm sure like to that point your friend could lend you money. I mean, in the future it'll be easier to do. You just create a smart contract through whichever cryptocurrency. It would go through Bloom. They would check, find out your credit. You would have a Bloom, ID, and it goes from there. But there's 3 parts to it. Let's go through that now. First one being Bloom ID. Bloom ID lets users establish a global federated identity with independent third parties who publicly vouch for their identity, information, and legal status. So you have, basically references first, and you have this identity, and people that will vouch for you. So that's your Bloom ID. It's you, and just like you'd have references in a resume, you have references for your Bloom ID. So that's the first part to it. Second part is Bloom IQ. It is a system for reporting and tracking current and historical debt obligations that are tied to a user's Bloom ID. Just like what belongs with your name. So you have that history of credit, and you have what you're currently paying, and basically all the information when it comes to lenders that are attached to you or tied to you, and what you've done in the past is your the Bloom IQ. And then your Bloom score is a dynamic and inclusive indicator of an individual's likelihood to pay debts that adapt to the maturity of a user's credit history. So that's Bloom score is like your credit score. So as you can see, this is very similar to what we have currently, as our own credit scores and what credit bureaus like already do, but it's in the form of on the blockchain through Bloom, which is a cryptocurrency. But like I said, I do believe they can do it better, and they are solving the issues that we talked about before. But that's their 3 main aspects of it. I'm sure as we go along it'll expand even more, but I like it that they've kind of centered themselves specifically on credit scores like this. Their scope isn't too vast. They're not they're not like on top of this we're also going to be lending. We're also going to be used as a bank. We're also going to have our own, blockchain and side chains. So they've kind of set themselves on one specific idea on credit, and they're kind of moving from there. I like it so far. Let's keep going. So on the website, before I go on to the next part here, I kind of want to show you how interactive it is. I think it's really cool. I like websites that are done very well. Even though it's in its somewhat early stages, they did do a pretty good job with the website. White paper needs some work. We'll go to that in a second, but I want to show you how it kind of like goes from here. So you see the Bloom token, how it kind of builds up around it. But this part is where they talk about the Bloom token. So the Bloom token allows organizations to participate in evaluating user identities and creditworthiness. It also serves as the voting token to guide the evolution of the Bloom protocol. So by owning these tokens, first off, like most of these cryptos, it is a vital part to the system. The token needs some use in the system, but it is a way of transferring the value within its own system, just like most of them. It's not so different. But another aspect to the token is voting rights. So you get to have a certain say in the algorithms or how they choose to rate people or whatever else like that. So you basically have voting rights along with it. So okay, well, it's going to talk about a little bit as you go through, but like I said, I love the way they present themselves. It's very layman termed on the Bloom page for everybody to be able to get the idea. So the protocol voting, BLT, the Bloom token, makes it sound like BLT sandwich, but BLT will serve as a voting mechanism for instituting changes to the Bloom score phases and algorithms. As you go along, accrediting attesters. Payment history providers and lenders will need to submit proposals to the ecosystem regarding why they are trustworthy, what their business does, and why their data should be included in the Bloom score. The next part of it is network currency. Like I had said, identity attesters and risk assessors on the Bloom network will be able to set prices and receive payments for their services in Bloom token. These organizations pay the Bloom token as an application fee, and in turn, users who vote on their eligibility will receive a portion of that fee. So you can see how it's kind of going in the circle here. They're making kind of a circuit. And then finally, the Bloom invitation system. While the network is in its infancy, and it definitely is in its infancy, without a wide array of attesters, it is more susceptible to attack. In order to increase the immediate resilience of the network, users will be required to put up a small amount of BLT as a collateral for users who they invite. Ante up! This collateral serves as a protection against a mass-scale network of malicious accounts. So that explains really well about the tokens and why they want you to put up some in the first place when it is young. When the system is very implemented. So hold on, my cat got me a little bit of something to throw him. It serves a purpose for that means, but it is an entire system. And they do really they do explain it very well. The next part that I want to get to before we really move on is the Bloom card, which I think they, I think the only other people that have cards, I think 10x does something like this, and there's a few other ones, but basically within the system, the Bloom card is going to do the same thing that, when you get your first credit card, it's going to build your credit in the first place. It's going to be able to take the data of what you do, how much you pay off, within that system. But the Bloom card, it kind of explains itself, but what they say is when the first projects based on Bloom credit infrastructure launched alongside the Bloom protocol, it will help build up your Bloom score by spending responsibly. It's probably just it's not very advanced, pretty basic. As long as they can get this to work, people will end up they'll in a way they'll be a lender themselves. But I think it's a good idea. I don't think it's implemented yet. We'll go on and explain the timeline of things in just a second. But that was cool. Let's go on. So on to their roadmap. Number one, phase one, is going to be the invitation system and the voting part. So this is where they try to spread out and grow from there. But it'll allow for users to use BLT to invite their friends and colleagues to see the initial network securely. Users with Bloom token will be able to vote on early development-related proposals for the future of the network. That is a very, like I said, decentralized idea of it, where the people who own it get to make decisions on it. How that's going to work, I've talked about this in other videos too, but I do believe that that the future will be decentralized, and it will be a positive thing. I think a lot of people might not understand this, especially if it's young folk who maybe don't even have credit in the first place. I don't know if their decisions are possibly going to be the best ones for the network in itself. So sometimes having a centralized governing structure to it that has a lot more knowledge than other people may have, it might work better off. We'll see. I mean, time can only tell, and that'll be not only Bloom, but every other part of the decentralization of cryptocurrencies from this point on will kind of follow very similar protocols too. Second part, Bloom identity matching. Phase 2 will deploy an application allowing users to verify their identity and get matched with their Bloom ID. During this phase, users will be able to confirm identity information and connect data for Bloom IQ. Phase 3 will be credit staking. That's the peer-to-peer staking modules will be built first, followed by organizational staking. So that part is their precursor to their Bloom score. Of course, everybody likes the idea of staking, and the question will be, will you use your tokens to stake for the network too? We'll talk about that soon. Phase 4, let me go out to phase 4 and 5 here so my head's not blocking it completely. Phase 4 is the creditworthiness assessment. Phase 4 will allow users to check their score, as well as open up a developer ecosystem to lenders to check a given user's Bloom score, providing sufficient privileges are granted from the loan recipient. So that's the part where after let's go back to number 3. After the modules are built and and it's being able to be staked. The creditworthiness assessment basically just says that the ecosystem will open up to be able to not only check somebody's score and their identity and for them to be verified, and because there already is enough of an ecosystem built around it, that's when they can start to kind of, it's right before they can launch their protocol. Phase 5 is their protocol launch and their Bloom card, like we had talked about. So once the risk assessment and scoring protocol is complete, Bloom will launch the Bloom card. Bloom card will serve as a brand new way for individuals to display creditworthiness and improve their Bloom score. So that's when it all really ties in together. And then there's finally a phase 6, the democratized autonomous credit infrastructure. That's a nice long phase there. Over time, the Bloom token flows through the network. Lenders, data attestation, providers, and borrowers will all own the Bloom network token, and their amount acquired will correlate to their influence in the network. So the more that you have, the more decisions that you can make. One of the things I worry about, not necessarily one of my worries, I guess it really is, but I mean, who are going to be the biggest owners of the rights to make these decisions on the Bloom network? Are they going to be people? Are they going to be large lenders? I mean, there's no really way of knowing yet, but I guess we'll see in the future. I think the little guys will eventually get bought out. I mean, institutional lenders and investors are probably going to be the biggest ones here, and they're probably going to do what they can to get the profit out of it. I don't know how well that's going to work, and only time will be able to tell, but we need you holders out there, the hodlers. But I still think, regardless, kind of going back to what I said earlier, the people with the most amount of it will probably be, the institutions that have the most knowledge of how to do it. So it is, regardless, it's going to be more efficient and it's going to be more transparent. But if the people that do have the most Bloom tokens that do make those decisions are people that can make reformed, better decisions for everyone, it'll be a positive thing, but there's, like I said, only time will tell. Going to the team here. Sorry, I cut myself off just a second ago. Going to the team and the advisors. From this point, I really want to mull on how much. I mean, it's not a superstar sort of team. A lot of them are very young, but for the actual team itself. But even though they are, they're whiz kids, man. I do like them. I've looked up, their LinkedIn's. I've checked their history. I've Googled all these guys, and they got some spunk, and they have a lot of knowledge behind them. And even when we go to the advisors, you'll notice that they have the experience in the background. The main thing I always want to see in a team is, do they have people with experience in what they're doing in the past? And they do, especially in the advisor roles. But the team itself, very, very well educated. A lot of them have their own companies. One of the things I will say about them is they seem like they have a lot of projects they're working on. Hopefully, theoretically speaking, they're focusing on Bloom, and they're very they attribute a lot of their time to this project in itself. But you never know. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You see that there's success with other companies and what they've done before. Like I said, they do have success. A lot of people already have a lot of money, and they've already done it really, really well. And they have working businesses. But the other side of that is how much time can they put into this? How involved are they if they have so many things going on for them already? There's, once again, no way of knowing it. A lot of this is speculative. You kind of just have to have faith in it. That's the stupid thing of saying, especially investing. Faith is. I'm definitely a numbers guy. Definitely, have to be logical about it. But if you are a little bit of a speculator, you have to have faith in at least the team. Take that as you will. So Jesse Limegruber, I'm gonna assume it's that's the way to pronounce it, but if you click on the page, it'll tell you a little bit about them. He's one of the co-founders. Studied computer science at Stanford. He's an advisor to the Alchemist Accelerator, a Teal Fellow, and a mentor of the European Innovation Academy. Really quick, when somebody is sorry, my allergies starting to act up. When somebody is a Teal Fellow, that does mean a lot. If you don't know who Peter Thiel is, he is one of the super minds coming out of. He's one of the people that worked, for instance, with Elon Musk in Silicon Valley. He's a tech-minded individual. So people that are, sorry, I'm like petting my cat. People that have experience as a Teal Fellow and that are accepted to be in the program, very, very impressive. But as we go along through all these guys, you'll see. So I think it's four co-founders or three. Yeah, so 4 co-founders. Ryan Faber developed behavioral recognition methodology designed to leverage online psychographic data for user acquisition. Using his research, Ryan launched Flatiron Collective. Now manages over $100 million annually in digital marketing spend. Like I said, all these people have their own projects they're working on too. A lot of these guys are Stanford. I'm assuming they all met together at Stanford. Stanford being one of the best schools in the entire world, not just the nation. Stanford is extremely impressive to come out and to be successful in Stanford too. So like I said, these guys are very, very educated, and they all have their own businesses. This guy John Backus, founding research scientist at Stanford Bitcoin Group. Studied computer science at Stanford University, and he also is a Teal Fellow too. Like I said, the list just goes on. Let's go down to some of the advisors here. Once again, excuse me, I'm getting over my allergies here, but like Joey Krug is one of the ones I liked. So he's a co-founder of Augur, and if you are into cryptos, you know what that is. And you'll see one of the other guys is Bounty OX. So this guy's from Aragon. He's the project lead and co-founder. This guy, Meg Nakamura, CEO of Shift Payments, and this Joseph Ergo, co-founder of District 0x. Impressive to say the least. Like I said, I do worry that they're doing way too much and don't have the time for all this. But if they are devoting some time, well, advisors, they're not fully part of the team. They're just kind of there, answer questions, help them along. Be there for important events, but a lot of big names here. Very impressive, very, very impressive. Give the team like 9 out of 10. Like I said, a lot doing here. The only reason I didn't give them a 10 out of 10 is because they're all, I'm sure, very, very busy with their own projects, but great so far. Now we're going to go a little bit. We're going to finish up, go to the white paper, talk about everything else. So when I went through the white paper originally, I noticed it was done pretty well. It does get technical, but it still is in layman terms. Very, very good white paper. It is just in the community draft It's like a version point 3 or something like that. So it's not their finalized version, but I think it's done well enough to where they don't really have to change it much. I like it a lot. I'm going to go through a few of the important parts of it, but I'm not going to, like I said, I never really go down the whole thing. Definitely look at it yourself, check it out. You'll like it a lot. But they say in 2015, the U.S. Congress declared credit scoring to be a monopoly controlled by just one organization. As you know, FICO scores. You all have one. You've dealt with it before, or some of you might not have one. That which Bloom, I guess, hopes you don't. FICO provides credit scoring for more than 90% of top U.S. lenders. FICO's credit scoring system leaves over 26 million Americans credit invisible and additional 19 million unscorable. And then it goes past that, saying there's 3 billion people in this world that do not have credit scores, and they describe themselves to do a brief overview, and kind of a lot of stuff is we've already talked about, but it does, like I said, it gets more technical. And if you do want to read more about it, definitely go through the white paper. They talk about the Bloom ID, the IQ, and the Bloom score, and how the system's going to work into itself. We kind of already explained that it's going to eventually kind of go full circle. So some of the parts that I want to focus on. So securing the Bloom network. One of the people I read, I don't know if it was on Reddit or somewhere else, but they were saying how they can be easily accessed and taken over by kind of bots, or people that set up their own accounts and do a small little credit ecosystem and lending system and verify themselves, and they can kind of go against the network. So the way they're going to deal with that is by securing the Bloom network. This is what they're going to do. They say an attacker could create hundreds of fake Bloom IDs and have these fake accounts all stake each other. The attacker could then set up her own, or maybe his or her own fake loan organization, and have the fake accounts pretend to take out and pay off the loans. This process could effectively produce Bloom IDs that appear authentic and with a good financial history that the attack could then use to defraud real loan originators. So they can do that and go against the whole. They can literally look like anybody that's a good lender, a good user. They can make fake accounts basically and verify those fake accounts within their own small ecosystem that they created. So the Bloom network will bootstrap the network by marking a small number of users and organizations as trusted network participants. These participants will be manually vetted by the Bloom team. Loans, attestations, and risk assessments involving trusted participants during the bootstrapping phase will mark certain participants as authentic Bloom users. Trusted users will be instructed to only stake people they know and are willing to vouch for, so they are unlikely to stake the fake user credited by our attacker. Likewise, unless the attacker is willing to create and maintain a real loan company, the real users are unlikely to interact with the fake loan companies. So basically, you kind of plant seeds, and that's what they want to do. I remember if we talked about phase 1, starts out with you working out with people that you know, people that you can attest to, people that you can verify yourself, and it just goes from there. So it branches out, and everybody goes from there. So you can't make your own small ecosystem within Bloom by yourself. You can't do it in a certain way. That's the way they're fighting it. Is that foolproof? No, but it was one of the things that I kind of read about, and I was like, what are they going to do about that? And so let's go a little bit further. So this part of it right here, which is the risk evaluation and reliability scores, it just shows how Risco as an intermediary affects you and also the people that you stake, for example. So your reliability score and your peer score is they're the variables used within Risco, and everybody that you've staked yourself, you also affect them too. So like we had talked before, every decision you make and all the loans you have, it also has repercussions for the other people that are within your little ecosystem within Bloom. But it goes from the score updating, goes through Risco, kind of an intermediary, to loan approval and the contracts between Alice in this example here. It goes further down into the scoring and the phases of how it works and how to calculate the reliability score. And it does get pretty technical. It talks about the beta functions, and they use a lot of sigma functions in it too. I'm not going to get too far into that, but it does have multiple phases, and they explain it pretty well on how it does work and the life cycle of it. But if you do have a second, if you have the the mathematical knowledge, you can see how it does work. A lot of it though is the reason I'm not going to get too far into it. I don't know how much of that is subject to change. The reason why is it talked about how the community and the BLT holders can change the mathematics of it, basically, like the algorithms and the decision making. So I don't know if this is going to be dynamic. I don't know if it might change over time or how much it will, but they already what's on the white paper is what I'll choose to believe at this point. But from what I gathered from it, it seems to be very similar to what most credit companies have at this point. So, but it's going to be done, automatically. I think there's going to be not a lot of room for error on this. So I do like it. The rest of it just talks kind of what we talked before, about the invitation system, the roadmap. The one thing I will say about the roadmap is I like to time a project. So when they have different phases on their roadmap, I kind of want a date attached to it, like quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four. Some of them even get to the point of like dates, like around, is it going to be around like April 10th to 20th is when you can expect that. And so you can decide on if the team is reaching their goals and there's certain time limits. Are they working hard towards it? And so you can kind of make your decisions from there. But it is sort of vague. I don't like that. But I guess we can only see from here on out how this goes. As we go farther into it, talks about their team, which we've already kind of went over before, and then gives a special thanks, then references. Like I said, a fairly decent white paper. I liked it. It's subject to change. It isn't the final draft white paper. I'm sure they'll make it look better and nicer, and they'll change it from here on out. But it still is somewhat a very new project. The main part that I liked is their website, how good they were explaining themselves. The more I think in terms of why for instance iPhone is one of the best selling devices in the entire world right now, is because it's so simple. The user interface is it doesn't get any easier to use. You can give it to a grandparent, and then navigating from there and the functioning of the entire OS is really, really simple. It's the simplicity that gets people. So I love that about first off about iPhone, but secondly about the Bloom website. It's interactive, gets you excited about it. I think people will respond to that. But I like the project. Going off into it, we're gonna go back to CoinMarketCap. It is 0.73 USD right now. Actually, let me update this really quick. 0.72, so it's gone down about 5%. If we look into it, it's dropped since the ICO. Okay, so that was around January, and it's kind of gone up and down and slow. It's like going sideways now. Like we'll see like random fluctuations. Its low point was around let's see, 0.57 seems to be the bottom. Yeah, it's kind of bottomed out around 0.57. So that's kind of the floor that we have with this one. What can we expect in the future for Bloom? I don't like to, if you watch my channel, I don't like to talk too much about prices. What I will say about all of your decisions that you should make within the cryptocurrency ecosystem, within the whole idea of cryptocurrencies or investing in general, don't buy at highs. If it is going sideways, it's pretty decent. If it's like this and it's not making too many up and down spikes, it's not super volatile. It's just kind of remaining steady. Like I said, it's been around that point, 60, 0.70 for at least since the beginning of February. I do believe that it will go down probably a little bit more. I think because it is so new, they are one of the things I will say is that they're marketing very well. I see pop-ups about them all. Because of my browser and the things I search in Google and everything else like that, I've seen ads for Bloom quite often. I am one of those people that I've looked up Bloom before. I've looked up a lot of cryptocurrencies, but they seem to be putting themselves out there more than a lot of the other ones I have noticed. That would make you think, are they spending more than they should be right now on marketing themselves? When should they market themselves? How far into their project should they really start to pay for something like that? That's a whole nother question. They do have a lot of money they're working with, but they are paying a lot of people too. Overall, I think it is a sort of long-term hold. I would wait till I would probably assume it would go back to that floor again. I think it won't necessarily, you won't see a huge spike in this just yet, but do I believe it's a good project? Yes. Everything that I've read through, the people that are working on it, it all passes. Overall, the only other thing I worry about is, like I said, their team is working on quite a lot. They have within Bloom, people that have worked for Augur, for what's the other district, 0x, people that have their own complete projects that they're probably really invested into, and the advisor doing other things too. So there is a few things I want to see. I want them to hit parts of their roadmap, and I want them to hit it in a pretty decent time. If they're not hitting this stuff within the next few months, if there's not updates all the time, I would worry about that. That's stuff that I'd be like, well, maybe they're not fully invested in this, but only time will tell with this. But overall, I am gonna invest. I haven't invested in Bloom yet. I will invest into it though. I think it is a long-term hold. I think in the future it will get some use out of it. Like I said, as transportation increases, you're gonna see the need for something like this. Anyway, I'll kind of wrap it up with that. I just want to say thank you everybody for subscribing, for liking, commenting. Let's get some good conversation going. Thoroughly enjoy another wonderful episode with you guys. Hopefully you can subscribe and you do get the alerts from me. So whenever I put another one out, you can like, comment every single time. Thanks again. Love all you guys. I'm out.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's